Hi guys, this is Justin Fields. This is my third video having to do with the Forrest Fenn treasure. My first video was something of a documentary, kind of a travelogue of my hunt along with a couple friends in Kirwin, Wyoming for Fenn's treasure in 2019. And then I followed up with a more detailed explanation video going through our solve and the 9 clues as we saw them in the poem. And how we ended up on Mount Sniffle in Kirwin. I got a lot of great feedback from both videos, so thank you guys who watched and who commented and who reached out. I really appreciate it. Since then, we've received a ton more information from Jack Stuef, the finder of the Forrest Fenn treasure. I want to start off by thanking Jack. He's been super polite and responsive, to me at least. Sent him probably 24 emails and he's responded to almost every single one. He's been, in my opinion, very generous with his time and his thoughts, and both in email and contributing to Medium articles and whatnot. So thank you, Jack, for continuing this hunt. I know a lot of people are frustrated that Jack knows the solution and he won't share it, but you know what, there were 9 or 10 years where there was one guy, Forrest Fenn, who knew the solution and he didn't want to share that. So really not much different than that, other than we know a lot more now than we did before. We've got it narrowed down to one state, Wyoming. We know that all of the clues, all 9 clues, fall within the borders of Wyoming, and it's still fun if you want it to be. So I encourage people who are still interested in kind of figuring this thing out to continue to do so, and in happy spirits, which is probably what Forrest would have wanted. Today I'd like to focus on the blaze and what we've learned about the blaze from Jack. Of all 9 clues, I think we've probably learned the most about the blaze. We've had additional information about where warm waters halt and a couple of other items in the poem, but I think we've learned the most about the blaze. And so in this video, I'd like to explore whether we might be able to identify the chest's location by doing exactly what Forrest told us not to do, which is look for the blaze. So I'd like to discuss Jack's responses and comments having to do with the blaze and how we might use those to help identify the location where the chest was hidden. So of all the comments and answers that Jack has given or made with regard to the blaze, there's one that stands out to me as by far the most important. It was an answer that he provided in the Medium article where somebody asked, "Can you describe what the blaze is/was?" And Jack's answer is, "I think that could imperil the location if it ever becomes known. Sorry, but there is a hint in the book." So that's a 2-part answer. The first part of that answer, I think that could imperil the location if it ever becomes known. In other words, if the nature of the blaze ever becomes known, if somebody ever identifies it, it could imperil the location, the general location of where the treasure was hidden. That to me says pretty loud and clear that if you know what the blaze is, you'll know where the location is. So that eliminates, I would think, 90% of the blazes that people have been discussing over the past 10 years. It can't be something as simple or as generic as a rock or a mark on a tree or a waterfall, because if you think about it, Jack could answer the question, yeah, it was a waterfall, and you would still have no idea really where the location is. So it has to be, the blaze has to be something so unique that if he told you what it was, you would have a pretty good idea where the chest is hidden. The second part of Jack's answer to that question is there's a hint in the book. From early on, Forrest had said there are a couple of hints in the book, in addition to the 9 clues that are contained in the poem, that could help you identify or decipher or assist you in breaking down the clues in the poem. And I don't think ever knew what those hints refer to, or whether they were in regards to specific clues, or how they would help you decipher the poem or assist in deciphering the clues in the poem. This is, for the first time, evidence that one of the hints in the book applies to the blaze. So now we can go back, and I've done this, go back, reread The Thrill of the Chase, looking for a hint, knowing specifically that we're looking for a hint that would help identify what Forrest's blaze was. To me, this is fantastic information. A couple of other comments that Jack made with regard to the blaze that are interesting and perhaps helpful were that the blaze was damaged or possibly destroyed, and that of all 9 of the physical representations of the clues, the physical things in the real world that Forrest was referring to with those 9 clues, the blaze was the most susceptible to damage of all 9. So those are both interesting comments. They may, in the context of our larger search, help, but not quite as much as the first comment, in my opinion. And then the last comment that he made, to me, which stands out as fairly important, in respect to the blaze damage, he mentioned that Forrest was somewhat surprised to learn that the blaze had been damaged this early in the hunt. He said that on 2 occasions he used either somewhat surprised or surprised that Forrest was somewhat surprised that the blaze had been damaged. So to me, this suggests that the damage done to the blaze was not necessarily part of a large-scale fire or landslide or flood, something that Forrest would probably be aware of if he was kind of keeping an eye on his location. You would think that if he had hidden it somewhere where there was a forest fire a few years after he hid the treasure, he would not be so surprised that the blaze was damaged. So to me, this says that the damage done to the blaze was probably localized to the blaze itself, whether something fell on it or, it fell over or it cracked in half, whatever the case may be. It's not something that was damage done on a large scale that would have probably been known by Forrest, given that he's paying so much attention or was paying so much attention to his secret spot. Another interesting answer that Jack gave with regard to the blaze is that somebody asked, would you have found the blaze in 2018 on Jack's first boots on the ground if it hadn't been damaged? And Jack's answer was, my feeling when I first went there early in the search season in 2019 was that it was an area of forest that I had never been in before, so probably not. If I had gone in that area, I probably would have needed some luck to notice it, even without damage, because I didn't know what I was looking for. Jack later went on to say that he thought it was a mistake, his own mistake. He thought it was a mistake to go out looking for the chest without knowing what the blaze was first. So this tells me 2 things. One, the blaze is probably not something that's so unique that it would stand out to just a casual searcher. It's probably, based on these comments, something where there are more than one of them in that area. Maybe it's something that's even common to the area. And that Jack really needed to know that he was looking for that type of blaze before he went back and started looking around. So I do think that the blaze is likely something that's common to the area, that there are more than one of that type of thing in the area, and that Jack really needed to know that he was looking for something like that in order to find the chest, and that he didn't necessarily know he was looking for that type of thing, which is why it would have evaded his notice on his first hunt. I asked him in an email, do you think that Forrest expected that the successful searcher would have determined the nature of the blaze from that hint in the book, The Thrill of the Chase, prior to going out there and looking for it? And Jack answered, yes, I think he expected that. To me, that blew me away, because I had never heard Forrest say anything even approaching, that you should know exactly what the blaze is before you go out looking for it. I think 99% of the searchers who've gone boots on the ground just figured out what they thought were the 9 clues and then went out into their area looking for something to stand out. Jack, said in one of his answers that he did the same thing, and he thought that that was a mistake in hindsight. He thought basically he should have figured out the blaze first. I then asked him, can anybody recognize the blaze in the book, or do you need to be familiar with the location? He said that's a good question. Considering it took him so long to see the hint, he thinks it was crucial that he had searched extensively throughout the area and seen what features were around. He then came back, reread the book ostensibly, noticed the hint, and then went back looking for that type of thing, didn't find it, came back home, thought, well, it must have been damaged because I know that's exactly what it is. Imagined what the blaze would have looked like damaged, went back out, found the damaged blaze, found the chest. So he did say he thinks somebody could figure out the hint without ever having been there. He just thinks it would be more difficult. So I think great information. So taking all the information we learned from Jack's answers and comments regarding the blaze, I went back through the Thrill of the Chase, read it line by line, looking for something that I tried to imagine being in Jack's shoes, going out to some region of Wyoming, finding some area that has something common but unique to that area, and then coming home and looking for a hint in the book, or reading the book and finding a hint that said, hey, I was just in an area that had this kind of thing in it. So based on that, I went through the book, jotted down a couple of notes on things that stood out to me as potential blaze-worthy hints. On page 6, Forrest is talking about going bald. He's talking about his hair turning gray, and then he makes a comment about how Dwight Eisenhower, when he lost his hair, said it had to do with, it was his brains pushing his hair out, essentially. So to me, that was kind of a reference to being wise, like, you're so intelligent, your brain's pushing your hair out. So we have a comment about being wise, followed immediately by Forrest saying his hair turned gray, well, white. So, something white, again, I don't think that's necessarily the clue. It's just something that stood out to me because if, Jack said, for instance, the blaze is a white rock, you wouldn't really know where to start. Okay. In the Totem Cafe caper, we all know the references to Canyon Street and canyons in Forrest's hands and the brown gravy and Frosty, the chef or whoever. So all these words that kind of line up with key words in the poem. And then the name of the cafe itself, the Totem Cafe. So I started to think, well, are there any places in Wyoming that might have totem poles? I know Forrest said the chest is not associated with a man-made structure, and then he said look up structure for more information. If you look up structure, it's a man-made thing made of more than one piece. A totem pole, as far as I know, is just a single piece of wood that's been carved, so maybe that is some kind of clue. I don't know of any place that has totem poles or lots of totem poles in Wyoming, so it's not really that great of a clue, but I just thought it was an interesting. There are some pole canyons, Pole Gulch, and things of that nature, but I don't think that there are necessarily blazes in those areas that would be very meaningful. And then one that stood out upon a second read, or further read to me, which made more sense and was more intriguing, is when in My War for Me, when Forrest is talking about flying his plane, trying to stay awake, worrying about losing oxygen, and he looks at his fingernails and they're not purple, so he knows he's getting enough oxygen. I think one of the words that stood out in the poem to people who are reading it or you're searching is quickly. Look quickly down. Seems, interesting choice of words. You could, say any number of things to get the person to look down quickly, to me, stood out as kind of strange. And of course, if you look up quick, it means fast, but there's also the quick of the nail, basically the soft flesh below your nail or below your toenails. So I thought, well, maybe quick is kind of a hint to pay attention to nail. And even on our Kirwin trip when we went, I had that in mind, but I was thinking more of like an actual hammer and nail. And we found a interesting wooden structure that was shaped like an X, and it had a giant nail sticking out of the top of it. But going back into the book, here's Forrest talking about his fingernail and making sure it doesn't look purple. So I started looking around at things purple in Yellowstone. There are two things that stood out. One are lupine flowers or lupin flowers that are purple, and there's like a lupin meadows where these things grow. I don't know that would necessarily serve as a blaze because flowers come and go. The most interesting, though, was a find very near the Lamar Ranger Station called Amethyst Mountain. Amethyst can be a purple gemstone, and Amethyst Mountain is known for, rock hunters. You can climb up there and find gemstones. And I was thinking perhaps the purple had to do with some kind of amethyst formation. And maybe there are several of those on Amethyst Mountain. And if Jack had seen those, he had walked by them, not thinking much of them, but then he came home, reads this purple nail comment, goes back, says, hey, it must be something related to the amethyst. So let me look at every outcropping of amethyst that I see on Amethyst Mountain. Just a theory. Amethyst Mountain is also right next to Specimen Ridge, and Specimen Ridge is known for petrified trees. There are several famous petrified tree stumps and, freestanding partial trees, petrified wood. So I didn't find a clue or a hint in the book that pointed towards petrified wood. I'd like to go back through and look for something to see if I can find anything, but it would make sense if it was a petrified tree, the blaze, possibly one that fell over or crumbled, something that Forrest would have expected to last a long time, because given that it's a petrified thing, it's not like a regular tree that would fall over. It would make sense with the brave in the wood. If he had hidden it in a little nook below some petrified tree, it would also make sense that Jack wouldn't have noticed it or wouldn't have thought to look at every single petrified tree while he was climbing around on Specimen Ridge, or an area like that. And then, of course, if Jack had said to you, the blaze is a petrified tree, you'd have a very good idea of where to look, because there are not very many places in Wyoming where you're going to find a petrified tree. Same thing goes with an amethyst outcropping, if it happened to be something like that. So those are my thoughts on the blaze, the hints in the book, and how we might be able to use those to narrow down the location, if not the exact blaze, that Jack is referring to and that Forrest had hidden his treasure in. Another type of blaze that others have mentioned that would kind of fit this bill would be a petroglyph. I don't know that there are any hints in the book that refer to petroglyphs or writing, but if the chest was hidden in an area where there were petroglyphs hidden or written on rock walls or cave walls, there are very limited number of areas where you would find a petroglyph. And it's, again, something that's been around for hundreds or thousands of years that Forrest expected that, would be around for a while. He said you couldn't remove it, or, wouldn't be feasible to remove it, maybe just trusting that most people wouldn't. And all three of these types of blazes, like an amethyst outcropping, a petroglyph, or a petrified wood tree, those things kind of have intrinsic value, or monetary value perhaps. And I think maybe that's one of the reasons that Forrest and Jack decided that this type of area wouldn't be appropriate for tourists to make it a tourist site. Maybe they're worried about people chipping away at the remains of the blaze and taking pieces with them. It's, you know, kind of ironic that Forrest all these years said, you know, part of the reason he did this whole thing was to get people off the couch and into the forests and into the, you know, into nature. And that Jack kind of agreed and said, yeah, this specific area is not appropriate to become a tourist spot. So it's kind of like, well, which is it? You know, Yellowstone, if it was in Yellowstone, gets like 3 or 4 million visitors each year. So it's kind of already a tourist spot. I mean, maybe there are specific areas where they felt people shouldn't, you know, trample all over, and that's perfectly fine. I understand that. It's just kind of a conundrum in some regards as to whether this area is a place that should be enjoyed by people or people should stay away from. So that's all I had for this video. If you guys have any thoughts, comments, questions, please leave them in the comments below. Happy to get back to you and discuss further with anybody who's still interested in finding out where this thing was hidden. I want to know. Don't you? All right. Thanks for watching.